Trump is going to accept a visit from Keir Starmer. Keir's going to be trying to stick his tongue up Trump's anus, but Trump isn't going to be having any of that. Firstly, because Keir Starmer is about as relevant right now as Betamax, and secondly, because Trump knows where Keir Starmer has been, and that is all the way up Brokeback Mountain with Lord Ali. That's it. Batshit bonkers Britain.
Something happened in Britain that no one can ignore, no matter how hard the media tries to bury it. The Unite the Kingdom rally wasn't just another gathering. It was a signal that ordinary people are no longer willing to stay quiet, that the ground beneath our politics is shifting, and that those in power are starting to feel the tremors. Katie Hopkins has finally broken her silence about what she witnessed, what she felt, and what she believes the establishment is desperate to keep hidden. And in her words, there is both a warning and a revelation. A warning to those who thought the people would stay silent forever. A revelation about what truly happened on those streets when thousands came together, not for money, not for perks, not for promises, but because one man asked them to stand up. And at the very same time, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister who insists he has everything under control, now finds himself staring at cracks in the system that he can no longer plaster over with polished speeches and staged smiles. This isn't politics as usual anymore. This is the fight for Britain's soul. Katie spoke not as a politician, not as someone looking for votes or a career boost, but as a witness to something she described as impossible to ignore. She saw people marching in the cold, standing shoulder to shoulder, even when the streets grew dangerously tight, and refusing to back down when the authorities tried to make everything harder. No free food, no vouchers, no special treatment, just ordinary citizens moved by something deeper than politics. Hopkins described how it wasn't just the size of the crowd, it was the heartbeat of the crowd. The marshals, the volunteers, the people who worked for days without reward, holding hands to form pathways so families and children wouldn't be crushed. At the security teams that never left Tommy's side, the scaffold workers, the football lads, the families who carried flags they made with their own hands. She painted a picture of loyalty and unity that no government handout could ever buy. And that picture matters because it's the one thing the establishment fears most. People coming together for a cause they can't control. Now think about that for a moment. Keir Starmer, a man who has built his entire image on order, on calmness, on presenting himself as the voice of stability, suddenly has to deal with a Britain that doesn't feel stable anymore. Hopkins' words land like a hammer blow because they reveal something that the Prime Minister cannot say out loud. The public does not trust the institutions anymore. And when trust is broken, no number of press conferences can fix it. She spoke about betrayal, how ordinary Britons feel silenced in their own country, how they watch rules bent for some while being enforced mercilessly on others, how their voices vanish in the storm of media headlines that always seem to frame them as the villains. And she made it clear the rally was not about chaos, it was about finally being seen. But the establishment, from politicians to broadcasters, doesn't want you to see that. And then there's the twist that rattled the very core of the media machine, Elon Musk. A man with global influence, someone who has never hidden his disdain for governments that censor their people, appeared live in real time at a rally where Tommy Robinson's name alone was enough to scare officials from granting permits. Katie described how the team managed to pull off something most theatres with expensive equipment struggle to do, link Musk directly onto the big screens with flawless sound, visuals and timing. That wasn't just a technical achievement, it was symbolic. Because in that moment, two worlds collided. The raw, unfiltered voices of ordinary Britons on the streets and the voice of a billionaire tech giant whose message on free speech is heard across the globe. Hopkins made it clear that this was not an accident. It was a warning shot to those who thought they had control over the narrative. Because when street-level defiance meets global influence, the system begins to panic. The media's reaction told the entire story without even meaning to. Some outlets dismissed the rally as fringe, as if thousands of people could be erased with a single word. Others cherry-picked the loudest chants, the roughest edges, packaging the entire event as little more than anger and chaos. But notice what they'd avoided. Notice what they refused to highlight. They didn't talk about the sound team pulling off the impossible. They didn't talk about the volunteers standing in the rain for hours just to make sure children stayed safe. They didn't talk about Musk's alignment with the cause of free speech. And that silence is exactly what Katie Hopkins called out. Because if it was truly meaningless, if it really was just noise, why the effort to distort it? Why the scramble to downplay Musk's presence? Why the desperate attempt to frame ordinary people as extremists instead of citizens fed up with being ignored? That, Hopkins said, is the clearest sign of all that something bigger is happening beneath the surface. But here's the question that lingers. Was this rally truly about unity, or was it the spark of something that could spiral into deeper division? Hopkins warned that while the heart of Britain still beats strong, in ordinary people, the elite will not sit quietly. Keir Starmer may stand at a podium and claim he understands the struggles of everyday citizens, but he wasn't in those streets. He didn't feel the crush of bodies, the cold rain soaking through jackets, the raw emotion of thousands chanting, "We want our country back." He watched it through the filter of intelligence briefings and headlines crafted by editors in London offices, and that distance between the lived experience of the people and the polished narrative of the politicians is growing wider by the day. Katie Hopkins broke her silence not because she wanted to spark chaos, but because she knows chaos is exactly what will come if the truth is ignored any longer. Katie Hopkins didn't just speak about the rally as an isolated moment. She framed it as a mirror of Britain itself, broken in parts, but still alive with a pulse that refuses to die. She said what few dare to admit out loud. The people of Britain are tired of being told who they are, tired of being told what to believe, and tired of being painted as villains when they dare to disagree. That's the silence she claims has been forced on this country. And when silence is enforced long enough, eventually it shatters. The rally, in her words, was that shattering moment. She described it as ordinary men and women standing against a machine that has forgotten who it is meant to serve. That machine includes the media, the courts, and yes, Keir Starmer himself, the man now sitting at the top of the table, smiling for the cameras, while the ground trembles beneath his feet. Hopkins didn't mince her words when she spoke about betrayal. She said Britons have given their loyalty to leaders, paid their taxes, followed the rules, and in return have been rewarded with lectures, restrictions, and a constant feeling that their voices don't matter. She pointed out at the hypocrisy that ordinary people see every day, rules bent for some, excuses made for others, and yet the full weight of the law crashing down on those who dare to step out of line. This is the betrayal she described, the sense that the very institutions meant to protect the public have instead turned their backs on them. And it is here that her criticism of Keir Starmer cut deepest, because Starmer sells himself as the sensible man, the steady hand, the calm voice who can guide Britain through turbulent times. But how calm can a leader look when the streets outside his window are filled with chants that he cannot silence? How steady can his hand appear when entire communities are saying in one voice, "We want our country back"? And then comes the part that the media hopes you won't hear. Hopkins said that the rally was not about chaos, it was about order. Not the false order of scripted press conferences and photo opportunities, but the real order of ordinary people organising themselves without government help. She described the marshals linking arms, the volunteers directing crowds, the tech teams pulling off miracles, all of it done without permission, without official support, without the blessing of the establishment. And this, she argued, is what truly terrifies the people in power. Because if ordinary citizens can come together and create something bigger than any single politician, then the illusion of control begins to fade. That illusion is what keeps Keir Starmer standing tall on stages across Britain. Strip it away and all that remains is a politician who cannot connect to the very heartbeat of the people he claims to represent. But what makes this story so explosive isn't just what Hopkins saw, it's how she connected it to a much larger battle over truth itself. She called out the media for lying, or at the very least for choosing silence at the exact moments when truth should be spoken. They framed the rally as dangerous, extreme and fringe, even while thousands of ordinary families stood in those crowds, carrying flags, singing and demanding to be heard. They avoided covering Elon Musk's appearance because to admit it happened would be to admit that one of the world's most influential voices on free speech had aligned himself, however briefly, with the cause of ordinary Britons. Instead, they pushed a carefully packaged version of the rally designed to scare the public into thinking it was something to be ashamed of. Hopkins' words flipped that narrative. She told her audience that the real danger isn't in people gathering in the streets, it's in what happens when their voices are erased. And here lies the uncomfortable truth for Keir Starmer. He can control the language inside Parliament. He can order his MPs to clap on cue. He can rely on the media to polish his image and frame his policies in the best possible light. But he cannot stop what is spreading across the country. The sense that people have been betrayed and that their patience is running out. Hopkins said that the heart of Britain still beats strong, but it is no longer beating for the political elite. It beats for families who feel forgotten. It beats for communities that feel silenced. It beats for a country that knows deep down something has gone very, very wrong. And this is why the rally matters, not just as a one-day event, but as a symbol of what's coming next. Hopkins described the rally as a warning shot, a message that the British people will not accept being sidelined any longer. And she wasn't speaking just to the crowd that day. She was speaking to the government, to the Prime Minister himself. She wanted Starmer to hear the chants, to see the faces, to understand that Britain is not the orderly, stage-managed nation he likes to imagine. It is restless, it is frustrated, and it is no longer willing to stay quiet. The rally, Hopkins said, wasn't just about uniting the kingdom. It was about showing the kingdom that unity is possible without the politicians who pretend to create it. And in her eyes, that truth is both powerful and dangerous. Powerful because it shows the strength of ordinary people. Dangerous because it exposes how fragile the establishment truly is. Katie Hopkins ended her silence not to glorify herself, not to spark another headline, but to remind people that Britain is reaching a moment it cannot step back from. The rally, she said, was not just about one man or one movement. It was about a nation waking up to a truth the establishment has tried to bury. And that truth is simple. Ordinary citizens are not powerless. When they come together, when they refuse to be silenced, when they stand shoulder to shoulder in the rain and cold, they reveal a strength that no politician can manufacture. Hopkins described it as the heartbeat of Britain, a heartbeat that cannot be bought with promises or stifled with propaganda. A heartbeat that no Prime Minister, not even Keir Starmer, with all the power of Parliament behind him, can ignore forever. But as she spoke, the shadow of fear also lingered. Because for every chant of unity, there is the reality that those in power will not sit by quietly. Hopkins made it clear that the establishment will try to twist, to label, to divide. The media has already shown its hand, painting families as extremists, ignoring the real message, erasing Elon Musk's involvement from the story altogether. And yet the very fact that such desperate measures are being taken proves the point. If the rally was meaningless, why spend so much energy trying to discredit it? If the people's voices were just noise, why scramble so hard to silence them? Hopkins' answer was blunt because the rally was not meaningless at all. It was a warning, a glimpse of what Britain could look like if ordinary people refused to be managed. And this is where Keir Starmer enters the story in a way he cannot escape. He built his rise on the promise of calm leadership, on a carefully curated image of stability. But Hopkins reminded the public that stability without truth is nothing more than theatre. She said Starmer might smile for cameras, might deliver polished lines in Parliament, but his words cannot disguise the growing distance between the governed and the governors. That distance is now wide enough to feel, to see, to hear echoing in chants that say, "We want our country back." Hopkins insisted that the true challenge for Starmer was not foreign policy, not economic forecasts, but the simple question of whether he dares to listen to the people outside his window. If he refuses, she warned, the cracks will widen and the silence the establishment worked so hard to maintain will only explode louder. Hopkins left her audience with both hope and unease. Hope because the rally showed that Britain's heart still beats strong through its ordinary citizens. Unease because those in power will do everything they can to crush that heartbeat or twist it into something ugly. The question is no longer whether rallies like this matter. They clearly do. The real question is what happens next. Will the people be heard, or will the establishment's silence grow heavier, forcing the nation toward deeper division? Hopkins broke her silence to say one thing above all. Britain is at a tipping point. Ignore the warning shot and the consequences may be far greater than anyone in Westminster is willing to admit. So as the dust settles and the media tries to move on, one truth remains impossible to erase. Something happened that day, something raw, something real, something that cannot be explained away as noise. Britain has been given a warning, and the silence is over. But the question that lingers now is this: what happens when the people demand their country back and the establishment refuses to give it?